Welcome back, everybody. This is Real Estate Uncensored. Thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, my illustrious co-host is feeling under the weather today, so Greg McDaniel will not be joining us. I know you can go cry on your own, but this is going to be a great conversation today. Ken is with us, and we're talking about just the intersection of money and personal development. We're going to talk a little bit about his journey. He's done some really amazing things in the real estate space, in addition to being a coach and a speaker and a #1 best-selling author. And he's running around hanging out with the big names of the real estate investment space that you probably all know, but we'll refrain from dropping some of the names. We could go on about that all day. But I'm excited to talk to Ken because we're going to talk about some interesting experiences with getting rid of the baggage that keep you from actually building wealth long term. And if you're listening to this, obviously, if you're in the investing or real estate agent game, whatever corner of the world that you're in, essentially you are swimming in an ocean of money. And most people never get more than just enough to get by and get to the next commission check, which is a very sad position to be in. And I would love to help some folks in the audience get exposed to other things that they could be doing, because I think agents and a lot of people that are, I'm sure you know, Ken, a lot of people that have jumped from being an agent into investing, you're like 90% there. If you can sit across the kitchen table from a seller and build trust and rapport and close a deal, you're 90% of the way to being a successful investor already. So a lot of the things that you've done depend on that kitchen table skill set. So I want to expose some people in the audience to some new ways of doing things and a new approach. And you've got a whole wealth building formula and a system for that we'll talk about.
Yes.
But I'm curious, when you run into somebody today, what do you tell them that you do?
Great question. I tell people I do what I love. And, I'm creating a lot of destinations now, real estate destinations, and, in the sense where people get to succeed in real estate and, the destination is an extraordinary life. So what I do is I bring people from where they're at and I reduce the friction to get to where they want to go. And it's done through real estate, but what I've taught in the modern wealth building formula, and is basically the words that I put on a piece of paper, and it says modern wealth building formula, how to master real estate investing. It's really about how to master life and business, because there's a lot of different components, and you touched upon it. If it wasn't for personal development, that I think my first course was a Dale Carnegie course because I was afraid to stand up and talk, or I actually wasn't afraid to stand up and talk. I needed to stand up and talk and say the right thing without putting my foot in my mouth. I was on stage as an early kid doing magic as a magician. So, I would get real nervous and I would get up on stage and, the performances would always go well. But at a certain point, it wasn't about doing trickery or trying to amaze someone or have that shared experience of prestidigitation. It was about being able to articulate so that you could help people move their life forward. So, I really took on this, mantra in life after watching one of my favorite movies, which was Pay It Forward, is that, I am integrity, an honest and loving leader with magical, empowering skills to create endless opportunities for all mankind and to leave every person that I meet with more freedom, power, self-expression, and peace of mind.
It's a big goal. And I love that it rolls right off the tongue. So, you've got that down to the exact phrasing that you like.
Yeah, and we talked a little about Tony Robbins, but it was about, like saying that mantra 100 times when, I was struggling, and I had to get my mindset because, I guess, the question you may ask is, how do you kind of, get started, or how do you get the right mindset, and it's, that's what it's all about, creating that mantra saying like, hey, everything I need is within me now, instead of always feeling that you have to go get something, some of the factors that one of the things I wanted to say early on the call, Matt, is that I think it's important for all the listeners, right? Because, we all have to begin somewhere. And one of the most critical things that I've learned, and it was, you mentioned, we talked a little bit about landmark. Landmark is about removing what's in front of you. It's not about learning anything new, landmark worldwide. It's about removing what's blocking your view of something because you have a blind spot, right? So it's the baggage you're either carrying. It's a moment in your life that held you back. And what it does is, the number one thing it does is it restricts your listening, right? So at this moment, I'm gonna pause a minute and I'm gonna say, you probably hear a little voice in your head when I pause. It's saying like, what's Ken talking about? Like, who is this guy? Right. The point is that little voice is talking to you all the time. So you got to ask yourself, like, what's happening with your listening, right? I don't know if you ever ask anybody a question. Sometimes you ask them a question, they give you an answer to a different question. That's like level -1 listening, right? Right.
Yes. So it's like I'm going to say what I want to say as soon as you stop talking.
Yeah. So the idea is you want to be able to listen like at a level 5, which we won't get into listening details today, but you want to listen for someone's transformation so that you can give what I mentioned to you before, more power, freedom, self-expression, peace of mind, and lean in to, what that person wants. Mm-hmm. But it starts with the listening. Now, why am I saying that? Because every person that's on this call with us today or podcast is listening to us through a filter right now.
Yeah.
Right. They're listening from what they already know. So I would ask everybody, take a minute and just like you have this listening slate in front of you, and it's a canvas, and it has all this like distraction on it, and you can't paint a Rembrandt on a canvas of distraction. So like, as we move on in this call, I want you to clear yourself mentally. You see me close my eyes here, mentally, so that you can listen from a place of what you don't know. You don't know. That's a trick question, Matt. Like, what is it that you don't know? You don't know.
No way to know. And yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's transformation, right? So when you're listening from that, there's going to be something that you're going to discover that you couldn't hear before because you were listening through a filter. And I think that's an important point. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but, today's all about, how do you begin? And there was so many years that I just wasn't listening. People were saying stuff to me and I wasn't listening. I didn't hear it. I was listening from a different context. You listen like and say like, where's that, what's that coming from? What's the context, right? Because, people may not be able to see me, but when you look at my finger, it could be a finger. But when I was building skyscrapers, if I went like that, that means there was like a lift going to the roof or something, or, I was pointing, right? Or it could be a number, could be the number 1 or something, right? So a lot of times it's context and listening. I didn't mean to hijack the call there,
Oh, no worries. No, but that you kind of answered one of my questions, I think, because I was going to ask you, whenever we got to it, what was one of the most impactful things you took out of Landmark? And that if that's the thing that's on the tip of your tongue, you might have other things that you took away, but yeah, you kind of went right off the bat into that part of it. Yeah.
Let me give you, I love telling a story, because if I don't tell you what I really got out of Landmark and how, I could tell you about listening through a filter and, and it sounds like Ken's talking to you about theory, but I'll really tell you how it affected my whole life. Right. Yeah. So here I'm in my 30s. And I'm in this Landmark worldwide program, and I'm in it. I would say it actually probably saved my relationship with my wife, because when you're married 40 years, there's times you're like, I want to get out of here or something, and it was when we were in those conversations, it was all about possibility. There was always a possibility of just being able to really to work things out. And now I forgot the point that I was going to make.
So you're sitting the Landmark in your early 30s.
So here I'm in my 30s, and I'm sitting there, and I had listened to my dad through a filter through my whole life, but I didn't realize it. So here I'm sitting there in my 30s, and all of a sudden it goes back to when I was like 8 years old, and literally I'm sitting in the room, and I'd started playing Pop Warner football. I always wanted to be a football player. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers back then, it was the Steel Curtain.
Oh, yeah.
Jack Lambert. I remember Rod, Staubach played for the Cowboys, Terry Bradshaw. It was like the best football. Oakland Raiders against Pittsburgh. Forget about it. And, 8 years old, I go out on the field, and I was a little husky, and I had to go up the weight class. So I was playing in the 120-pound league, and I was only 8, And I was supposed to be in Pee-wees, but I was in varsity. And the first week, like I was sore, I was all beat up. And I remember telling my dad I wanted to quit. And he said to me, Kenneth, you need to stick it out. Now, I heard him say that he didn't love me, right? I was listening through a filter from my dad.
Right.
And this was something that held me back, like I believe at certain times in my life. And I'll explain why. So now I fast forward 8 years old. I graduate. I get a job as an engineer. And, I'm like, Dad, this construction company offered me 3 times as much. I want to, I think I'm going to take this job. He's like, Kenneth, you should really stick it out. You should really stay in engineering. So he said it again, right? And I'm like, wow, he doesn't love me. He's always telling me to like stay here. He doesn't see my vision. He doesn't believe in me. Yeah. You create this cuckoo story in your head. So I'm creating a story around listening through a filter of my dad, right? So now fast forward again. 29 years old, top executive in that construction company that he told me not to go to. Right? I'm now go, Dad, I'm going to start my own business. Oh, don't start your own business, Ken. Yeah, like that's so risky, and I'm like, wow, he doesn't love me. He doesn't want me to like see my vision. So I'm sitting in Landmark, like, oh my gosh, my dad's been like at every football game since I was like 8 years old, like was always having to catch with me, love me to death. He was giving me an answer from the tools that he had. My dad climbed telephone poles.
Yeah.
He went to work every single day. He started at $2,200 a year was his salary.
Yeah.
My mom worked as a bank teller, made like $100 a week. And I was like, oh my gosh. He was afraid of my uncle who worked on Wall Street because he was just a normal guy. He put his pants on one leg at a time. And then like that day, I fell so in love with my dad. And I was like, wow, why do I create these stories in my head? Why did I think this? And then I started to realize, wow, I listened to a lot of things through a filter, and just things started to open up in my life at an age where, I talk about level 5 listening. Probably back then I was a -1, like probably in some cases, you're 31, you think you know everything, but that's really what I got in Landmark. I got a relationship with my dad that I didn't have before going to Landmark. And I had a clearing that now he wanted me to be who I wanted to be. Like, just think like all of a sudden you didn't think your dad wanted you to be what you wanted to be. Now you just realize, wow, your dad not only wanted you to be that, he wants you to be more. Now, like every day, my dad's 87, my mom's 87. Every Wednesday, I drive to Delaware. I have breakfast with my dad. He's like, how's your project going? He goes, Kenneth, I get some confused sometimes because you got so much going on. I'm like, hey, Dad, look, I printed this 60-page thing out. You could actually flip through it, ask me some more questions next week. He's like, but that's what life's all about,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was talking to one of my mentors the other day. And we were talking like finance and stuff like that. And he's like, have you read George Soros's book, The Alchemy of Finance? I'm like, no. Like, this is like, from like, I think the early to mid 80s, it's a little bit before my time. I'm like, I love reading old books, by the way. So lay it on me. He's like, all right, go get that book. So I get the book. And he talks right off the bat. He's like, he felt like his competitive advantage was recognizing exactly what you just said. There's a difference between actual real reality and people's perception of it. And when we don't recognize that that's going on, we screw ourselves up, and then collectively everyone screws each other up, which is how you get the boom and bust cycle to begin with. So yeah, that I don't think I really connected that when I was in my 20s and early 30s either, that I was not looking at the feedback I was getting from the world correctly. I wasn't listening. I wasn't hearing what the world was telling me. I wasn't analyzing success and failure correctly. And therefore I wasn't able to make the right adjustments. And when I started to get better self-awareness and better perception, that was when things started to get really a lot better for me. So that's maybe it's just something we all have to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not always, everybody experiences it differently, like you just said, but you get the same end result.
Yeah, but what you said about your dad is interesting. I'm gonna have to meditate on that later, because man, when your parents don't take care of themselves the way you think they should, it hits you the exact same way, which is that you don't love me enough to make changes in your life to stick around for longer.
Yeah,
but that's not actually what that is. And that's something I'll take away from this, and that'll improve my relationship with my parents.
Yeah. And the beauty of it is, like, it's kind of reversed. Like, now my dad likes to watch, go down, get his food. He likes to go watch TV. I'm like, Dad, come on, let's take a little walk. You should walk a little bit. You got to move a little bit. Like, moving keeps you alive. I'm like, don't you want to see the grandkids? The great grandkids. I'm like, so we have fun. And
good.
He's like, come on, I want to watch TV. I'm like, come on, let's go.
I know. I want to be that 90-year-old who's spry and walking 5 miles a day. Okay. So you have this experience at Landmark. You get out of engineering, you get into construction, you do really well, you start your own business. So let's, flash forward a little bit. What's the next major kind of personal development challenges you started to run into especially as you became an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So, I had a job for a long time, till my 30s. I kept going to school at night. I always never felt that I was enough. I learned with Tony Robbins, we all have those two primary fears. They all go back to, I'm going to fail or I'm not enough. But at 31 years old, I was 6 figures in debt. I had the twins. I was looking out at the World Trade Center and I was like, I wanted more, and I started a company. It was about 1997 and I was still working for Bovis at the time. But I was like, if I don't make myself ready to receive and open up a bank account, it's never going to happen, Okay. So like, that was my philosophy: open up the company, open up a bank account, and be ready to receive. And literally by 99, I went out on my own and I only knew, we all have a superpower. I know how to build. People could be an accountant. Someone could be in finance. I was speaking to someone today, went to Harvard and CPC finance. We all have a superpower. I was a builder. So I said, if I could just build a $10 million project, I could pay myself 5% fee, 8% general conditions, another 5% profit on the construction side, and have ownership. That'll be pretty good. So I did that, and
just casually. So I went and did that. Yeah.
but I didn't really know what I was doing. But,
yeah.
The thing is that and this comes down to, don't let what I did intimidate you. It's because it's the same for everybody. It's that epiphany moment where you believe in yourself that you can.
Yeah.
Right. Because, it took, like I kept going to school at night. I kept taking another course. I kept asking another mentor. And, eventually you have to go, are you, can you believe, do you believe in yourself? Can you do this? Like, and who you're going to talk to if you panic, if you start hyperventilating, you think you made the wrong choice, so, and that's the key that we're talking about. Like, I only did what I knew, right? So if someone is good in finance, or if someone's a good bookkeeper, if someone's a good connector, if they just do what they're good at doing and bring people together, they'll get through the process, right? We all have to build a dream team around us of people that are better than us, that have the expertises that we don't know. We mentioned it earlier in the call. It's about, what is it that you don't know, right? Like, I know that I know civil engineering, but I don't know civil engineering as well to put it all down on paper and go in and present it. Like, I've done it a few times. Like, I don't know traffic engineering. Like, I'm not an environmental expert, but I know a little bit about it. Right. So, like anything, if you're putting together a group of people to buy a person or real estate, those are just strings that we're talking about. You heard the story, Henry Ford, he graduated 7th grade, but he knew, as an analogy, which string to pull. If someone was asking him engineering questions, if someone was asking him legal questions, he'd pull the L string and the lawyer would come in and answer the question, But, I think really it's important that, I started, with no confidence, coming out of college. It took me 6 years. So, I felt like a failure.
Oh, wow.
To get out of college, my first undergraduate, and it was really the sports in me, being an all-state football player.
Yeah.
When that was one of the dots, because you mentioned, personal development into money making, et cetera. And I think health and fitness is something that's important. You hear body, mind, spirit, not that I want to talk cliches here, but there's, like, once upon a time, I was 246 pounds when I was with Tony Robbins at Life Mastery when the World Trade Center collapsed. And, I climbed a telephone pole that day after, 50 foot, stood on top, really fat. And the next day walked on 45 feet of fire. Today, I weigh about 170 and I'm in the best shape of my life. I ran about 10 miles this week and good to go.
Oh man. Okay. So there's a lot we can dig into there, but I just want to drive the point home. When you went out to do that first project, so it's 97, 98, you didn't wait until after you felt like you were the guy to do it. You went into that with a level of, still self-doubt, lack of self-confidence, wondering, can I do this? Like, you didn't wait until you had the confidence to go do it. You just did it, and the confidence developed over time. How many projects did you have to do to where you actually felt like, okay, I've got a handle on this. Like, I know what I'm doing. I know I'm the man. I know I can do the next project. There's no doubt anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It took it, so I bit something off I built like a, big gorilla, the first one. Right. And it went really, really well. And the money I made, in 2001 was lost in an instant when I was with Tony, when the towers collapsed, and I had invested all that money I made from the assisted living into a waterfront property, looking out at this, World Trade Center.
Yeah.
So when that kind of went down, bring me back on track here, because I broke my pattern.
Confidence. So you come
like,
out of that huge deal, you lose everything basically that you'd invested.
Yeah. Got it. So here, like I said to you, so I built this first project and I had a lot of confidence. And then all of a sudden I lost it. And I was like, oh man, now what am I going to do? I was like celebrating in Hawaii, just made a boatload of money, had invested it in Bay Street Landing, where you literally get on a ferry and go over to Manhattan, and that disappeared. And I came back to New York. I wasn't sure what to do. I had done some construction projects, and it took a while, because that knocked the confidence that I had away from me. Because I was all of a sudden I kind of lost all the money again. So, I didn't mean to hesitate in explaining it. So, a lot of times you'll get the confidence, and then you're going to get tested, right? And you're going to get knocked off your perch.
Yeah.
And it's important that, that you have that mentor behind you to reach out. And at that time, I didn't have mentors that were close to me. I remember sitting in the garage, getting back from the Hawaii event and down to like my last couple bucks. And I think I was smoking a cigarette, and I had this coach. And I'm like, you ain't believe it. I picked up a cigarette. I'm so nervous. He's like, eat it. And I literally started eating it. He's like, cause I didn't want to smoke. And he's like, he goes, you got any money? I'm like, I'm literally got like, not much. He's like, flush it down the toilet. Okay. And I swear I'm flushing money down the toilet and eating cigarettes. and I'm like, this is my coach from the Tony Robbins event. Right.
Okay.
And he's like, you're going to get through this. And I did, and I ended up getting a geriatrics facility that pulled me out. I ended up losing Bay Street Landing, but, came back strong a few years after that and built a beautiful transit village at Union Station next to Keene College, with a direct line to Manhattan. And then was at the top of the world again, built a tower at 240 Park Avenue. Tom Brady and Giselle came to see the penthouse. I was partners with Lehman Brothers on 3 massive projects. And then we lost $300 million in one day. So, and the funny thing was, my mentor told me, you're going to lose it twice before you make it. And you're going to make all your money between 55 and 60. So, I made like a lot of money in the last couple of years, but, I probably would have made a lot between 55 and 60, but COVID hit, and I had to pivot a business that was generating pretty good money out of New York City, which just flipped upside down, but it's funny. And not that I'm going to tell people they're going to lose it twice, but, confidence is something you're going to get. And, sometimes we have a tendency, because Rome wasn't built in a day. It's okay if you slip back into the old you, it's about recognizing, because we're not perfect, and when you get under extreme pressure or something happens, it's by human nature that you're going to resort back to maybe more of a comfort level. Because as you know it, Matt, life doesn't begin until the end of your comfort zone. Right. Mm-hmm. So when you're out there on the edge and living it, and all of a sudden somebody chops you out and gives you a cross body block, you'll go sit on the couch for a couple and go, damn, that hurt.
Well, it's a lot like, I feel like personal development is a lot like watching the stock market. The stock market gets overextended, it's going to pull back. Now that doesn't mean it, but it still is trending up. But even within that upward trend, you've got big swings up and then swings back and then another big swing up. Like overall, you're going up. But within that, you're going to have, you're going to have pullbacks and corrections, and like where you talk about kind of pulling back to who you are, but all throughout you're growing.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a slightly different analogy because growing up, I didn't know a lot about the stock market, but I used to get we used to play Pop Warner. We had a really good team, but you used to get your bell rung. Yeah, you get hit, you get up, you start seeing stars.
That was when strong safeties actually meant something, right?
I'm like, what just happened there, man? I got my bell rung. But it was good. But yeah, it seemed like in my career, I definitely had my bell rung a couple times, and thank God, I had read a good book, Dale Carnegie course I remember taking, and then, Tony was one of my huge mentors. I went through his whole, Unleash the Power and Life Mastery and then Master University program. And, then Jack Canfield. And, so we all have mentors, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm at a stage in my life, we're opening up a huge fund. And, I have to find some smarter guys that know more about the EBITDA and increasing the multiplier by intellectual property. And, I'm pretty good at my age. I can navigate, but I wrote a paper in 1996 called Plan Room 2000, and I was kind of probably one of those outliers at the time. These young kids, they see these things with the blockchain, and I see it too. I just don't have the time to take care of all the technical aspects. Let me handle the real estate. I'm now manifesting, and I believe I have found one, to create some intellectual property and to proprietary systems around a machine that I'm going to build that won't just be a fund. It's going to be an entitlement fund that specializes in development and then does everything else, but no one's going to really know what we do because we'll be so vertically integrated. And we're coming in from the blue ocean instead of the red ocean. So
interesting. That's got to be an amazing spot in life to be able to play around with a big idea like that. That's really cool. Man, there's a whole bunch of stuff we could talk about. I will finish out with a couple more questions, but what's the best way for people to connect? And especially if they're in kind of the beginning end of their wealth building journey, where do you want them to send, send them and get involved?
Yeah. I just took some time and I recorded the 11millionairesecrets.com. And we have a landing page that gets you into my system. But I wanted to start everybody off with my 11 millionaire secrets. One of them we talked a little bit about today is mindset. It gets into wrapping your package and, ecosystem merging and all kinds of great stuff. But I always tell everybody there's the 11 millionaire secrets. And once you're in my system, we have the 8 golden nuggets. And if you ever want to speak to me on kenvanliew.com, there's a discover now button. It'll lead you to the opportunity to set up an appointment with me. And it's just a planning session. We talked a little bit about listening today. So I'll listen, and I listen at level 5, and I ask some really tough questions and see if it's a good fit for what we do. But we have a global real estate investment enterprise. I'm smiling because I call it the Cosa Nostra of real estate. It's very organized and it's legal. But once you get in, you don't get out. So.
I was going to say which of the mafia analogies holds the most true, but okay. Once you're in, you don't get out.
Yeah. Cause it's like people that are going to, come hang out with us, you're going to be successful because in my ecosystem, I have such a relationship equity that, there's 100 people now, it's going to grow to 1,000. So there's everybody in the project in the program directory that could help you out. So I call it an instant relationship equity that people can't find anywhere else. Yeah. And that's why I tease them, once you get in, you can't get out, because I make sure you succeed.
Yeah. Well, that's the best reason to stay in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always have a higher level of respect for people that start programs and memberships and things like that, where they actually genuinely care about whether people get results. They're more concerned with that than just selling more people in. So, all right, let's hit you with a couple rapid fire questions. So if you were starting over again and maybe you're in your 20s now, kind of, you know, this is 2022 with all the opportunities floating around. You mentioned blockchain being one of them. Is there anything that you're drawn to that if you were starting over now, you'd look into and jump into that world?
Um, you know, I probably early on, I would have wanted to learn about not to be afraid of money. You know, you know, I grew up in a family with no money, and I had an uncle who like worked on Wall Street, and my dad always kind of never really connected the dots for me. So I didn't have a lot of confidence around money. And I guess what I realized is you're almost always in the money business. So I teach people, I call them, you know, come up with not your elevator pitch, your money hook pitch,
Yeah,
right? Because, you know, it's like, you know, when people, and it's all about listening, right? So if you ask me, hey, and now you asked me that question at the beginning, and I probably should have did more of a scotoma, but you know, the way you asked it, it came across a little differently. But, you know, if I was in an elevator, people say what I do, and I'd be like, you know, well, you've seen the tallest buildings in New York City. Well, I've built them, and I've turned them into an opportunity where you could actually create a, you know, return on your investment. And, you know, it's not the best scotoma, because one of my students, I think, has the best. You ask her what she does. She goes, well, I sell drugs. She goes, the legal drugs. I work for Pfizer. She goes, I used to work for Pfizer. She goes, but now I do real estate and I give you a rate of return. And people are like, what? You sell drugs? You know, but what it does is it opens up the listening, right?
Yeah.
You know, when I tell someone I build skyscrapers, you're like, wow, you know, it does open up the listening. So, you know, I would just learn more about money and learn to open up people's listening, and just tell them what you want, because people are here to help you.
Love it. And then let's talk about mentors for one quick second. So if you were young and you were looking for a mentor to get you to the next level, especially when it comes to money mindset and things like that, what would you suggest? I mean, obviously they can get into groups like yours, but as far, yeah, like, let's say they connect with some of the people that are in your group, for example, and they spot someone like, man, I would really like to be in a relationship with that person. How do you, as a much younger person, go and find a great mentor for you?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think it really comes down is don't make it complicated. You know, don't reinvent the wheel. Try to mirror and model somebody who's already doing it. Right. So, you know, whether it's, you know, one of the 100 students in my group that you call, and, you know, they've come from all different angles of membership. You know, people like what we're doing because, you know, it's a little bit about personal development. It's a little bit about accountability. It's a little bit about having fun. We have, you know, the themes behind it. We have format calls, because, you know, it's all about, you know, gamifying things in life and having some fun. You know, I think I mentioned early on, it was when I finally brought my, you know, my all-state football gridiron experience to like, wow, that applies to business too. I just have to learn a playbook just like I did on the field and be the all-state linebacker I was, and then the game will go forward, you know. So one of the chapters of my book, also, you can get my free book on my website, it talks about a baseball lineup. Like, where are you in the lineup? Are you the leadoff guy? You know, are you batting third, you know, getting on base? You know, are you the cleanup guy? Are you more down in the, you know, down at the end of the lineup where you start the, you know, the plays up again, you know, and you just kind of do like a pregame warm up on where you're at, you know, see where you're at. And I analogize it a little bit, you know, to my son who's serving our country. I love him to death. He's going to be a major U.S. military, you know, be a sniper. Right. You know, a lot of times we take a shotgun approach. Don't be afraid to dial in a little bit longer, you know, on your target, and then just hit it, you know, right between the eyes, you know, and, you know, patience is a virtue. I hate to bring up cliches, but one thing, you know, if looking back, I didn't have a lot of patience and I worried a lot, you know, worry less and ask for help, you know.
Yeah, I love it. Worry less and ask for help. I especially love the sniper analogy. Completely agree. Especially in these days when specialization matters and you're competing up against people that have 10,000 hours into things, and you can't approach it casually. I feel like the deeper you go, the better. Love it. Ken, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And yeah, it's very, very cool digging into the mechanics of your journey and the self-development, the personal development part of stuff. I know people got a huge benefit out of that. For everybody that's listening, go leave us a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts and iTunes, and make sure to give Ken a shout out in that review if you enjoyed this episode in particular. Then of course you can always check out other episodes of the show. You can subscribe to us on YouTube and all the fun places. And until next time, we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, Matt.